Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. Today we're going to be talking about managed devices in OIE. Um, as always, I'm joined today by my partner in crime, Dimitri Volkmann, who is from our product marketing team. My name is Brent Arrington. I'm from the product acceleration team, and we're going to be delivering today's content. As always, I'll throw out the ubiquitous safe harbor exception. There may be some forward-looking statements during this presentation, so we'll throw that disclaimer out there. The agenda for today, again, as I mentioned, is going to be primarily managed devices. So we're going to be taking a look at some of the new capabilities and some of the differences in how managed devices are handled in OIE versus Classic. We'll have some time for Q&A. I do want to call out as we're going through the content today, if you do have questions, please add those questions to the Q&A in the Zoom Zoom Q&A section. We'll get those questions queued up, and we will have time allotted at the end of the presentation to go through those questions. It's also helpful to us if we do have more questions than we have time to get to. It helps us have a record of those questions so that we can then follow up and post the answers to those on our community site afterwards. So please use the Q&A in the Zoom chat for questions as we go. And then once we finish the main content, we also will have a refresher on how to go through the upgrade process for those of you that are still on Classic Engine and are interested in upgrading to OIE. And finally, we'll go through some helpful resources that are available to you for OIE in general, as well as the upgrade process. So before we dive in, I do want to kind of highlight some, I guess, some terminology changes or just some new concepts that are, I guess, relevant for managed devices in OIE that might be a little different from what you're used to in Classic. Number one, there is this concept of device assurance. And device assurance is something that's actually available in OIE, regardless of whether a device is actually managed or simply registered. The device assurance information and the device assurance policies are available natively through the Okta Verify app with a FastPass enrollment, whether the device includes an MDM integration or it's just the FastPass enrollment. But then if you do add the third-party MDM integration with that, like, for example, Jamf, et cetera, that allows the device to present a different level of attestation, I guess, to Okta. So it identifies as a managed device so that it can then be recognized and treated differently in your authentication policies. And the authentication policies are sort of what actually takes this information from the device assurance and the managed device status and puts action to it. So without specific policies that you define within your authentication policies, having the device assurance policies defined or having the MDM integration doesn't really do anything in Okta except collect information. It's when you actually apply those things to your authentication policies where you really see the impact. Now, I want to call out some terminology changes here, or sort of maybe some new terminology that doesn't really exist in Classic. In OIE, there really at a high level are two states for devices, two device states. There's unregistered, which if you're looking in your authentication policies, unregistered would be the any device category. And unregistered is basically any device that does not have a FastPass enrollment. And then the other state is registered. And as you may infer, registered is any device that is enrolled in FastPass, that does have a FastPass enrollment. Now, once you get to the registered state, within registered devices, there are two categories there. And again, as I said, registered equals having a FastPass enrollment. So for registered devices, you can be in one of two categories. You can be an unmanaged registered device. That's a device that has the FastPass enrollment without any third-party MDM integration. So it's enrolled in FastPass, but that enrollment did not include the shared secret for a mobile device or the cert for a desktop device that would indicate the MDM enrollment. And then the other state for registered devices would be a fully managed device. And that is the FastPass enrollment, where at the time of the enrollment, you included the shared secret for mobile devices or the cert for desktop devices to indicate that this is a fully MDM managed device. Now, before we dive in and kind of take a look at how all of this is set up and configured, I do want to address some very common questions that I encounter in a lot of my meetings with customers and office hour sessions related to managed devices. Probably the most common question is FastPass required for managed devices in OIE? And the answer is yes, it is. The FastPass enrollment is the mechanism in OIE through which a device is registered, and only when a device is registered can it then be seen as managed, because that registration with the shared secret or the cert is what allows Okta to identify the device as a managed device. Probably the next most common question that I get, it relates to desktop device trust specifically. Specifically, if you're on Classic, you may already be aware that you can upgrade from Classic to OIE without disabling desktop device trust. So that's a little different from mobile device trust, where you have to fully disable it before it even allows you to upgrade. With desktop device trust, you can leave it enabled through the upgrade. And for your existing devices that are already enrolled, those will continue to be treated as managed devices from a policy perspective through the upgrade. And so commonly customers will ask, do they really need to change anything post upgrade, or can they just leave the legacy desktop device trust in place? The answer is you do need to change. The ability to upgrade with the legacy desktop device trust is a stopgap measure. It's intended to avoid any sort of gap in security or any gap in experience for the desktop device trust for the existing enrolled devices. It's not intended to be a permanent state, and you will not be able to add new devices until you move to the new way of doing device trust through the FastPass enrollment. So while that will get you through the upgrade fairly seamlessly, you do want to have a plan to switch over to the new OIE way of doing device trust, even for desktop device trust, as soon as possible after the upgrade. And then finally, another pretty frequent question that we get is, what exactly is the difference between a device that is registered and managed versus registered and unmanaged in Okta? So I noted that a lot of the capabilities around device assurance, et cetera, are available even without the MDM integration. So even if you just have a registered device with the FastPass enrollment, those device assurance policies can apply the device assurance information that is gathered natively by the Okta Verify app with a FastPass enrollment. So it doesn't require an MDM integration. So the short answer is, from Okta's perspective, really the only difference between a managed device versus a registered and unmanaged device is just a different designation for policy purposes, right? Now, outside of Okta, obviously, if you have the MDM enrolled, you have a much greater degree of control over that device. And that's what warrants the different designation in Okta from a policy standpoint, because for devices that are enrolled in your MDM and that you have greater control over, you may be more comfortable allowing access to certain applications or having different levels of authentication requirements for those devices versus devices that are simply registered but don't have your MDM enrollment. But functionally, from Okta's perspective, it really is just a different designation, and it allows you to treat those devices differently in your policies than you would treat a device that does not have your MDM enrolled. All right, so that's enough slides. Let's take a look at how all of this is configured. I'm going to exit this mode here and move over to my Okta tenant in the admin console. And the first thing when you're thinking about rolling out device management in OIE, again, as we noted, FastPass is a requirement for this. So the very first thing that you'll need to do is to enable FastPass under authenticators. So from the admin console, if you go to security and authenticators, under the Okta Verify authenticator, you have the option to enable FastPass. Now, if you are upgrading from Classic, even if you already have Okta Verify enabled in Classic, when you upgrade, FastPass will not be enabled by default. You would only have TOTP or push notification, whichever of those two or both that you have enabled in Classic. That's all that would be enabled when you upgrade initially to OIE. FastPass will never be enabled by default if you're upgrading from Classic. So you will have to come in and explicitly enable FastPass in order to get to the device management. Now, FastPass serves other functions besides just enabling the device management. It's also an authenticator. And so there are some options here that apply to that authenticator functionality. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about that. I want to focus on the device management aspects today. But one of the things you will want to pay attention to is this sign-in page option. So there is an option to include the big sign in with FastPass button on the sign-in page. Again, this is an option. So if you don't want to show that button for users to click to sign in with FastPass as an authenticator, you can choose to hide that if you like. Or if you want them to use it as an authenticator, then you can show that button. One other thing that I'll note, and this is a kind of a forward-looking statement, we do have a feature that will be coming very soon that will allow you to do different instances of these authenticator settings. So today, if I enable FastPass for the Okta Verify authenticator, that FastPass capability is enabled for anyone who can enroll in FastPass. So there's no way to sort of split out the FastPass capability from the rest of the Okta Verify capabilities, at least from an enrollment standpoint. That is going to change. So there will soon be an ability to create multiple instances of the authenticator settings, so that I could have one setting for Okta Verify that has FastPass enabled and target that to a specific group or groups of users, and another instance of the Okta Verify settings that does not have FastPass enabled. So that is coming. It should be available hopefully sometime early next year, but be on the lookout for that. As far as the enrollment process for Okta Verify, you've got some flexibility there in terms of how you want to allow that enrollment to happen. These are all the possible ways to enroll. You can enroll via QR code in the browser, link via SMS or email, same device. This is what we're going to see demoed today. This is basically an authentication directly from the device that you're trying to enroll in FastPass. So basically just signing in to your Okta tenant from that device where you're trying to enroll FastPass. And then you can also do a device-to-device bootstrap. This is through Bluetooth. So if you have an existing enrollment on, say, a phone and you want to enroll a desktop or vice versa, then you could essentially bootstrap the second device through Bluetooth using the existing enrollment on the first device. Now, once you've got FastPass enabled, if you go under device integrations and endpoint management, you can add a platform for your MDM integration. So if we look at this, actually, so first off, you pick your platform, iOS, Android, or desktop. For iOS, you can see you can either let Okta generate a new secret key for you to use as part of that MDM integration. Or if you're upgrading from Classic, if you have your existing secret key from Classic, if you had mobile device trust enabled in Classic, you can bring that existing secret key over and just paste it here. Otherwise, you can have Okta generate a new one. And then you just plug in your information about your provider and the enrollment link, and this information would come from your MDM. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail specifically on the MDM side. That's going to vary slightly depending on your specific MDM provider. I will note that there is a knowledge base section, which we'll have the link for later in today's presentation, that goes into some detail on some of the most common providers, and gives you some steps on how to implement some of the most common providers, Intune, Jamf, etc. Um, but from the Okta side of things, the setup is really pretty minimal. It's your secret key, your provider, and your enrollment link. Now, I'm gonna cancel out of this because I think I already have one set up for. Well, and this is actually fake. It's not working, but we have a iOS provider already set up. Once you have this in place for at least one platform, um, the next thing that you can look at is your device assurance policies. Now, again, the device assurance policies are not dependent on having a third-party MDM integration. This is available even for just registered devices without the MDM integration. Um, but if we look at the policy settings here, again, for your device assurance policies, you can pick a platform, and then you can pick the specific, I guess, configurations that you want to enforce from a device assurance standpoint for this given platform. So you can specify particular operating system versions. So you can either call these out specifically, or you can use dynamic versions. So if you use a dynamic version, if you want them to always be on the latest supported version, you can choose that. You can also do the second latest, so you know, the latest or the next to latest. You can choose whether or not you want them to be up to date with security patches. You can also do uh, specific versions here. Hold on. Where's the? Here we go. You can do specific versions here if you want to specifically call out um, explicit versions and not use the dynamic. You can do that as well. You can set requirements around the lock screen, so passcodes, Touch ID, Face ID. You can set jailbreak requirements. And then for remediation, this one is helpful to hopefully um, reduce help desk calls, because instead of just getting blocked when users don't meet the device assurance policy, you can actually show them a detailed explanation for why they're being blocked and what they need to do to meet the requirement, the device assurance requirement based on the policy. So you can display the remediation instructions. You can also set uh, a grace period. So you can either specify a hard date for everyone that they have to meet this requirement, or you can say after X number of days. And this would be basically the clock would start for individual users based on their first unsuccessful sign-in attempt, or basically the first attempt that gets blocked by this policy. Um, so you can either do sort of a blanket date for everyone, or you can make it individual to users based on you know, the number of days from the time that they get blocked for the first time. Now, once you have the policy in place, again, as I said, nothing really happens in Okta until you start applying these states and these policies in your authentication policies. So if we go over to authentication policies and let's take a look at this policy. So as you're creating your rules, you know, just like any other policy, you can filter this based on users types, group memberships, or target specific users. You can target the device state. Again, as we noted, registered means they have the FastPass enrollment. Any means they don't. And then this is where you would specify your device assurance policy. So by default, it's not going to have any policy selected. You can choose to reference one or more policies here. Now, it's important to note, you want to make sure that you have a separate rule for every platform. So if you have a rule that's specifying both, if you have a rule, you know, that's only specifying iOS and a user logs in from a Windows machine, that Windows device is not going to trigger this policy. So it would not be applicable. It would go to the next applicable rule in the policy. So you want to make sure that you add rules that govern all of the various policies, or excuse me, all of the various platforms that you want to support. And then once you've defined your assurance policies or reference your assurance policies from the rule, then you go about setting your authentication requirements. And again, you're free to set whatever settings you want here based on based on that assurance policy level. So you know, one factor, two factors, and again, you have all the same options that you would have with any other policy requirement here. You can get as specific as you want in terms of what types of authenticators you want to require, et cetera. Now, to kind of give you a sense of what this would look like. So this policy is set up to require specifically let me if I go back here. This is set up to based off of our iOS policy. And if we look at that policy requirement, I actually set that one to actually an unattainable condition here. My device that I was testing with was already on the latest, so I just manually set this to I guess a version that actually doesn't even exist yet, so that I could trigger this. But to get a sense for what this looks like, and if we show you what I've done here, so I've set uh, my version requirements. I've chosen to display remediation instructions. I've set the grace period for this to be 7 days for each user. So for each user that gets blocked by this, they'll have 7 days from the initial time that they're blocked by this policy to remediate the issue before they get locked out of the app. So to see what that looks like, if we take a look at an attempt to access this, let me switch screen sharing here a little bit. So this is a user that is logged in. The user has a FastPass enrollment. They are not managed, but they are registered, and so they have the FastPass enrollment. So we are capturing the device assurance information. Now, this user is going to attempt to access an app that references that iOS device assurance policy that we saw earlier. So when I try to access the app, it's redirecting for authentication. It's going to prompt me to authenticate. This is from an iPad, so it looks a little bit different than it might look from a desktop. But once I've authenticated and I get back to the app, I can see that I get this warning here that lets me know that my device did not meet the standards, and I have until X amount of time to remediate that, and it shows me specifically what version I need to upgrade to, et cetera. But it doesn't completely block me, so I am able to continue into the application and continue using the application as normal. But 7 days from now, that grace period will end and I will be blocked entirely. Now, let me go back to my Chrome here. There we go. Now, as far as the enrollment for FastPass and getting to either a registered state, or if you have the secret or the certificate for desktop devices, getting to that managed state, the enrollment process for end users looks exactly the same. And it's basically just the FastPass enrollment. And you can handle that in a couple different ways. There, again, I noted under the Okta Verify Authenticator that there are different methods that you can use to enroll. We've got the QR code, SMS, same device, or device-to-device bootstrap. And again, you can filter this if you like to allow for only the higher security methods, or you can allow any of these methods. Um, for our purposes, we're going to look at the same device enrollment. And you can make this fairly seamless for end users by using authentication policies in conjunction with the enrollment campaign. So I have authentication policy for that's requiring FastPass. If we look at this policy, uh, oops, don't want to add a rule. We'll look at the existing rule. I got to move this window out of the way. There you go. So this policy is basically only allowing access via FastPass. Now, you could apply this to a sort of bookmark app, or any sort of dummy app to facilitate this enrollment flow. And what will happen is when the users try to access this app, it's going to automatically prompt them to enroll in FastPass based on the authentication requirements for this app. Um, you don't have to apply this globally for your all the applications or any existing applications you have. You could actually have a specific sort of targeted application that you're using to promote an enrollment campaign and share that link um, with end users to initiate that enrollment flow. But what that would look like from an end user's perspective is this. And let me switch my sharing again. So here we've got a user who's going, this is a user that is a new user. It's just been created administratively with just a password, a temporary password that's been shared with the user. So this user only has a single authenticator enrolled at the moment, which is the temporary password. This could be, other types of authenticators. It could be an email, it could be, a YubiKey, et cetera. For the purposes of this example, we just used a temporary password. And I'll show you in just a second where you can specifically target the authentication policies that are required for this enrollment step. So here, this user is going to provide the temporary password that they've already been given. Because it's a temporary password, the first thing they're going to have to do is change their password. So select a new password. And now at this point, the app that they're trying to access, again, is the app that has that policy that requires FastPass. So it's prompting them to set up Okta Verify. So they'll go into the add accounts flow. And for this, we're just going to sign into the org. So again, just go through a normal login like you would through any other browser. Here we'll use the new password that was just selected. All right. The authentication succeeded. So now it asks if they want to enable Face ID. This step will likely not be seen by most users. This is because I already had a test account there. If this is the first account added, it would automatically be set as the default account, so they wouldn't get asked about that. And now at this point, they can, I'll stop that momentarily there. So you notice that there were three different options there. That's because this is on a mobile device, on an iPad specifically. Um, on iPads, um, there are three modes of authentication that are available potentially through the Okta Verify app. There's FastPass, but there's also the push notification and the OTP. Those The other two automatically get enrolled when you enroll in FastPass. So if you have push notification and OTP enabled under your authenticator settings, when you enroll in FastPass, it automatically will enroll all of those. If this were a desktop device, the only option would be FastPass, so you wouldn't have seen those other two enrollments happen there. But that's because this is on a mobile device that you get those other two options there. All right, let me go back to my admin console if I can find it. Here we go. Now, if you noticed, for that user, they were able to enroll in FastPass with only a password. And the reason for that, if we go back to our authentication policies, there is this specific policy now that's available called the account management policy, where you can explicitly define what the requirements are um, for enrolling an authenticator or for performing really any account management activity, whether that's enrolling a new authenticator, resetting an authenticator, etc. There is a default setting where if you only have one factor enrolled, which was the case with that test user that we saw because it was a brand new user that had only been created with a temp password. If you only have one factor enrolled and that's all you have, then only one factor will be required to enroll another authenticator. But once you have more than one factor required, then you would be subject to the requirements that you put in place here. So if you have a requirement here for two factors, which the catch-all rule does require two factors, then once you have at least two factors enrolled, you would have to provide two factors to enroll an additional factor, if that makes sense. So it's a way to kind of bootstrap users that don't have more than one factor enrolled yet, and allow them to get to that state where they have two factors. All right. I'm going to pause here for questions. Do we have, let's see, let me pull up the Q&A. Looks like we have.
Yes, that's a good question from Jason here. If you want to have a look at it, Brent.
So, as an admin, can we generate a report of people who have signed in and are not compliant? So I assume you're referring to
I think it was
grace
it was when we
period.
were talking. Yeah, I think the
Yeah,
question
yeah.
happened when you were talking about the grace period. So I would
Yep.
assume this is related to that. And Jason, if it's not, please clarify.
Yeah. Yeah. So for that, you should be able to see, and I don't know if there's a canned report for this or not, but you could certainly see in the system log. Uh, um, yeah, I'll look to see if we have any canned reports. I don't know if I don't usually look at the canned reports that much, so I don't know off the top of my head if we have them. But from the system log, if we go back, actually, if I it'll be easiest if I just go directly to that user. Um, if I look at the logs for this user and I see dun, 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 evaluation sign-on policy. Here we go. Let me move this so I can expand my thing here. So here is this the policy that we're looking at? It was iOS rule. It's app. Um, um, I'm not seeing where. So the outcome was basically just a success. I'm looking to see if it indicates anywhere that it was successful only because of the grace period. Um, I am not seeing anything. I'll take that question offline and I will post the answer to that in our Okta community site. And there are links to that we'll provide here in just a bit. I don't see, nothing's jumping out at me here that would indicate that it was successful because of the grace period as opposed to just passing the requirements, but I'll confirm that. All right.
And
So
the second part of the question was, is there a way to connect a workflow to that? So it looks like probably not, right?
um Off the top of my head, you might be able to. There might be a way to do that through uh, like one of the hooks, possibly like an inline hook. I have, I don't know that for sure. I haven't tested that theory.
Okay.
I don't know of any way off the top of my head, but if it were possible, it would be through some sort of an inline hook.
It could actually make sense. So feature suggestion, probably a good idea here.
And I guess the other thing, I guess depending on exactly how you wanted it to function, like it could also be possible to do uh, kind of out of band through a workflow that's keyed off of a syslog entry. Um, so like when that event is detected, you could fire off some kind of asynchronous workflow. If you wanted to, I don't know what action you would want to take, but from an event triggering standpoint, you should be able to key off of events in the syslog, assuming that we find the data needed to identify that it's you know um, that it's triggered based off of the grace period. Now, like if you don't have a grace period, or if you're past the grace period, then the access would automatically be blocked at that point. Um, well, actually, I'd say that it'll be blocked based on your catch-all, right? So um, if we go back and look at our policy, uh, sorry, I have to keep moving windows around because I'm blocking my view here. If we go back and look at our policy for this one here, um, oh, I don't want to. There we go. Edits. There we go. So for our rule, we've got this rule that references our iOS policy. And then the second rule is our catch-all rule, and my catch-all rule is denying. So basically, I'm saying, okay, if you're either going to meet this device assurance level, or you're going to get denied. So the way I have this right now, basically, you would not be able to access this application from anything other than an iOS device. That's where you would, I was mentioning earlier, you want to make sure that you have device assurance policies that cover all of your supported platforms. And then to block access, if they don't meet the requirements, you would have your catch-all rule set to deny. Alternately, you could, if you just want to target a single platform, then you could have your rule that references the specific assurance level, and then have a parallel rule that referenced the platform. So I could say, add rule and not specify a device assurance policy, but just target the iOS platform and then deny. Here we go. And then if I did this, then I could set my catch-all rule to be more permissive. Maybe I allow access, but with stricter MFA requirements, etc. So here I would only block for the iOS platform if they don't meet the requirement, but I could potentially let other platforms go through. So there are different ways to approach it, but you want to make sure that you have all of your um, supported platforms covered one way or another. All right, moving back to questions. Can you exclude a factor in the account enrollment policy? Um, so you're talking about these policies here, the account management policy. Yes, you can. So if we look at this policy, um, the the catch-all rule can't be edited, but you can add a rule ahead of this. Excuse me. So just like with any other authentication policy, you can add kind of a preemptive rule, and you can here have the same options that you would have in any normal authentication policy. So you can require, one factor, two factor, and you can explicitly, allow or deny or disallow specific authenticators. Um, let's see. BYOD devices. So yeah, so how do you manage BYOD devices? So this this is where I guess the distinction between registered versus fully managed is helpful, or potentially helpful. So if you have customers, if you have users who have their own devices and they don't want to enroll their personal device in your MDM, they may be willing to at least do a FastPass enrollment on their device. So it's not the full MDM. It doesn't give you the ability to, fully manage their device to the level that your NDM enrollment would, but it does at least register the device to Okta, and it does capture that device assurance information so that you can set assurance policies around, versions, lock screen requirements, etc. So you have some higher level of assurance without being as, I guess, intrusive from a user perspective on their personal device. Um, the way that you basically once you enable FastPass, the user would have that option. So even if you have the MDM integration, the user would always have that option if you once you have FastPass enabled to enroll their personal device in FastPass only without your MDM. Um, and that would get them to a registered state. And you can see, like, if I go back to my test user here, um, so for this user, if I look at devices, here's that iPad that this user enrolled. Um, I can see that this device is not managed because I did not enroll this with the MDM solution. So this would be basically just a registered device. This actually, I had this same device. I installed a different, I had a different test account on there. So that's why you see this different user here as well. But you can see that it's not managed, but you do still see the security signals. So you can see operating system, secure enclave, this disk encryption, et cetera, um, and all this good stuff. And all of this information is available to be used for the device assurance policies in your authentication policies. Um, some users may balk even at that. We have customers who have users who don't even want to install Okta Verify without FastPass, like just the push notifications and things like that. That's always going to be a thing with some users. But for those users who maybe don't want to go with the full MDM enrollment, but are willing to at least do the FastPass enrollment, you can get to kind of a middle ground where you get some information, but not the full MDM management. Um, all right. If Okta Verify requires biometrics, will the requirement apply to users with only TOTP and push? So yes, it can. But so with the TOT and push, if you require biometrics, then that biometric requirement would be enforced before it allows them to accept the push notification or to see or copy the code. Um, so yeah, that even for those two authenticators, the biometric requirement can be used to block that flow if they don't provide it. All right. We have Intune already added and integrated as an MDM. Does some of the Okta settings take precedent over the Intune policies? No, so no. With any MDM integration in Okta, uh, functionally speaking, integrating with Okta doesn't change anything about your MDM integration. The only thing that it does is it allows that device to attest to Okta that it is a managed device so that it can then be treated differently from a policy perspective. That's really it. It doesn't have any other functionality within Okta beyond just the policy designation, and it doesn't change anything about your MDM configurations or capabilities outside of Okta. Can I have a rule in the authentication policy to apply to a registered user, both managed and unmanaged, or does it have to be two rules? Yeah, they are the way that it's broken out. You would have to define two rules because it is if you look at the way that is structured, um, when you add a rule, it's one or the other. It doesn't let you just do. So it's either going to be registered and then it's going to be one or the other. It's you can't select both. So you would just have to do if you want to treat them both the exact same way, then you would just have to add two rules to the policy, one for not managed and one for managed, and then just apply the same policy settings there. The new rule in account enrollment policy cannot be progressive. I'm not sure I understand the question. Um, let me can I unmute you? Maybe you can give me some more context on that. Let me where am I? Here we go.
I've done it. I've done
Oh,
it.
you got it? Okay. There we go. Can you,
Hi.
can you
Yes, thank you for taking my questions. So yeah, this is Xin. So this question is related to my previous question. Can I exclude a factor in the account enrollment policies? You said that we can create a new rule in the account enrollment policy, but the new rule will either be one factor or two factor, cannot be flexible. So that means, I mean, the new rule cannot be one factor if user only have one factor. And if user has two factors, the user will have to use two factors. The new rule cannot be that flexible. Only catch all the default one.
So I haven't actually tested that.
Yeah,
I don't
that's what I mean. I think we are, you're a long way to find out the proper way to exclude a factor in the account management enrollment policy while also give us this, progressive, authentication capability.
Yeah. So I know I've seen that option doesn't appear. I don't know what the so have you actually tested this to see what the behavior would be if you tried to enroll with a rule above the catch-all? Like if you don't have enough authenticators to meet the requirement, does it still try to apply that rule or does it fail over to the catch-all rule?
It
That's
will still apply the rule. It will still apply the first rule, the rule on top of the catch-all rule, and require two factors.
okay. I will yeah, I'll follow up on that and see
Yeah,
if
please.
that's
Yeah,
something.
please follow up. Yeah,
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, I see. So that's the same question there that you're
yeah,
saying.
same question. Yes, that's right.
Okay. Can OIE, FastPass, Okta Verify get rid of OTP tokens in our environments? Potentially. I guess it depends on, you know, the devil's in the details, right? So if you're using if you're using physical tokens, there likely is a reason for that. Maybe I don't know if you have some population of users who are either unwilling or unable to install an app on their device. That might be one reason physical tokens are needed. Um, but I mean, theoretically, as long as your users can and are willing to install an app on their device, then yes, it could potentially get rid of the OTP tokens. Um, I don't know if that hopefully that addressed your question.
I kind of read that as not using like Okta Verify with OTP, if that's maybe how that question was asked.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So like disable the OTP capability of Okta Verify. Is that where you were getting at?
Yeah, that's kind of the way that I read it. If I'm not sure if
Yep.
that's exactly how they asked that question, but that's kind of the way that I read it.
Got it. So for that, the easiest way to address that would be through the authentication policy, and you can explicitly include or exclude OTP as an authenticator um, for particular policies. So if I add a rule here, and oh gosh, I keep having to move windows around. Sorry. So let's say any two factors. So I can explicitly disallow, OTP, right? So if I want to forbid that as a factor, I can do that, or I could go the other way and I can specifically allow only certain factors and not include OTP. So the easiest way to deal with that would be at the individual policy level for your authentication policies and just exclude that as a possible authenticator. Let's see. For best practices, is it better to have separate rules for mobile and laptop, or can we have it combined? Um, you know, I assume you're referencing having like including the assurance policies in that as well. Um, really, I don't see any like as long as you want to treat those devices, and unless you want to treat those devices differently based on whether it's desktop or mobile, there really isn't a need to separate them out into separate rules. You could have a rule that covered all of your supported platforms, and then have your catch-all rule just handle whatever you want to do if they don't meet any of those requirements. So maybe you deny it altogether, or whatever. But as long as you want to treat them all the same, then I don't see a huge benefit to having separate rules for each one of those.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mostly see customers do separate it, but most of that is, I believe, because they want different effects, right? They want different rules based on um, the devices, right? They were the different outcomes based on the devices.
yeah. And then last question, are you able to share or show settings in Intune to make the device managed? So we have a KB section, which we'll share the link for here shortly. We do have some information on Intune. That's one of the MDM providers that we do have some at least high level documentation on. For detailed documentation, you really want to go to the individual provider, but we do have some high level documentation on Intune and Jamf, and one other one that I'm drawing a blank on at the moment. But we will share those links here in just a second. And actually, on that note, since I don't see any more questions, I'm going to turn it over to Dimitri to talk about those resources. Let's see.
Yes. Thank you, Brent. I am going to share my screen. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. We're going to fly through this section. We actually covered this is a replay. We've been covering this section in pretty much all our webinars in the past 3 or 4 webinars. So if you do want to see this at a more normal pace, please watch one of our videos. And you can have a look at that. So the upgrade reminder here, and then we get into the resources. This session was obviously all about device context and what you can do with devices. But there are a few fundamentals that you really need to learn if you are still on your journey to upgrade from Classic to OIE, authenticators, authentication method, factor types, the policy framework, and as well as the assurance level models. So and we've covered all those topics in great details into our YouTube playlist. So again, if you're in the beginning of your journey, look at the fundamental first. It's a self-service upgrade. I assume most of you know that at that time. You either get this big banner on your admin console, or you have the ability to go into your into the dashboard and go to the OIE upgrade hub. We have put together a kind of a checklist. I'm not going to go through it. You have it here presented. So learn about the fundamental, do a test plan, upgrade your preview orgs, then upgrade your production org, and then enjoy OIE. So follow this checklist for your upgrade. And if you have specificities, obviously feel free to schedule some time with us about that. Finally, there's also additional guidance. Same thing. I'm not going to cover them, but there are a few end user changes. And if you've done customization into your org, obviously there are a few things you need to be careful. This is kind of your 101 basic things when you do any upgrade at the platform level. So again, reference information here. If you want to see more discussion of that, please watch one of our previous videos. In terms of upgrade resources, we actually have quite a lot of stuff. We've put together a specific page for the managed device documentation. So we will distribute the deck, but I also give you like a 30-second if you want to flip your phone and look at the link here. But you will have information. So everything about there's a dedicated page or section, I would say, with multiple page about managed devices, about mobile attestation, desktop attestation, best practices and tips, and also configuration steps for the most common mobile device management platform that exist in the market. So a dedicated resource page to manage devices, because it's one of the key capability of OIE, the whole concept of device context, and a lot of you have asked for information about it, so we created a specific section for that. More generally, there is a resource hub. So same thing, you can access this hub and see a bunch of overview, list of the knowledge base. And in the next pages, I just want to cover a little more some of those links. So the knowledge base, a specific page where you can find a lot of articles about doing the upgrade. Then we have the developer hub. So if you've done some customization or use the SDK, you can look at the different changes in the SDK, as well as the sign-in widgets, customization, and all developer resources basically are in this section. And finally, the community site, which is where you can actually book time with some of our experts in the product acceleration team, like Brent, to help you in your upgrade journey as well. And there's also a number of blog articles. We actually recently released a 4-episode series on demystifying the upgrade, which is a pretty good resources that covers most of the HKs we've seen throughout the period where we've been helping for quite some time now our customers to upgrade to OIE. So again, I went very fast if you want to, but I wanted to be cautious of time. If you want to look at this into more details, watch some other of our videos where I cover that into much more details. And OIE upgrade series will be returned, so I hand it over back to Brent for maybe just a few closing comments. And thank you so much for attending today.
Yeah. Actually, Dimitri, if you go to the next slide, the next meetup that we're going to have is going to be 2 weeks from today, on the 19th of December. It'll be our final OIE meetup of the year, calendar year anyway. And this one is just going to be an ask me anything. So we'll have myself and a lot of other much smarter people than me on the call to take all of your questions around OIE, the upgrade process, or just OIE in general. So keep an eye out for that. Also, the resource links that Dimitri went through, I've posted for those of you who are live on the call here. I posted those in the chat window. So if you want to grab those links, they are there in the chat window as well. With that, again, thanks to everyone for your attendance. We very much appreciate it. Keep an eye out for the recording of this and other helpful recordings on our YouTube channel, the Okta's YouTube channel. And Dimitri, Andy, thanks to you as always for joining and helping out. And we look forward to seeing you all again next time. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Great day.